and welcome back to the second day of the 2022 Gaming in Germany conference. I hope you had a good night's rest, and that, like me, you're looking forward to another day of information-packed sessions. As opposed to yesterday, when we focused on high-level regulatory information, the goal of today is to provide you with more practical knowledge on market developments, taxation, marketing, and compliance. Before we start, please note, like yesterday, that our conference program is interactive. That means that we welcome audience questions to our speakers and panelists. To make this easier, we're making use of the Slido app. It's very simple to use, and if you wish, completely anonymous. In order to ask questions, please scan the QR code that you have on your badge. I think it's the left one. If not, it's the right one. Or visit slido.com and enter the event code #GIG. At the end of every session, there will be time for an audience Q&A, most of the sessions. If you prefer to ask your question in person rather than through Slido, simply raise your hand and somebody will come to you with a microphone. With this out of the way, and to set the stage for the rest of the day, we have with us Dr. Jörg Hofmann, head of the Gaming and Betting Law Practice Group at Melchers law firm. Dr. Hofmann will briefly look back at some of the issues that were raised yesterday and, more importantly, to consider their practical impact on the industry. Jörg, thank you very much again for being here, and we are very eager to hear your thoughts. Welcome.
Thank you, and good morning. Yes, good morning, and welcome to day 2 of the Gaming in Germany conference. Obviously, you all had a good night, like myself, and we're ready to start the day. I've taken some keynotes from yesterday's keynotes. So, to recall, what have we done yesterday? First of all, we started with a look at the global perspective. And the most interesting thing I learned from IMGL President Mark Ellinger, who started the first keynote yesterday, was that in the US, regulation, licensing goes pretty much faster than in Europe, and in particular than in Germany. And then I recall Mrs. Wiesiewski from the GGL saying, that will change. We will be faster as well. Probably next year, when the authority takes over and when the gambling committee is no longer in its current position. Then we looked at Germany, and it was interesting. I summarized the current issues which are going to be discussed at the moment, and I learned that the representatives from the trade associations later identified the same issues. These were the application proceedings. When will they be finished successfully? These were the deposit limit discussions, the exemptions from deposit limits. When will it going to be applicable? When can it be changed? When will we have final decisions? Also, the discussion about the permissible bet types catalog published by the Regional Council in Darmstadt earlier this year. There's still court proceedings, there's discussions, there is hope to find a settlement. As well, we had this discussion about LUGAS. I'm happy to listen to Mr. Schleifer, who is the LUGAS expert from the State Administrative Office in Halle. There are technical topics, there are legal reasons for discussion, data protection issues, and of course, time frames to be discussed when the server system, in particular the safe server system, will be ready to be applied and to be connected to. And finally, and maybe most importantly, it's a discussion about enforcement. We had a panel about enforcement. We had a keynote given by Mrs. Wiesiewski about the enforcement power of the GGL. And you may remember GGL took over responsibility for practicing enforcement against illegal gaming and advertising for illegal gaming as of 1st of July this year. That's the only responsibility they've taken over earlier. Everything else, I call this always being or becoming the super regulator, everything else will be taken into effect as of 1st of January next year. In her keynote, Mrs. Wiesiewski said one remarkable sentence, which I like to quote. She said, "We will remove the illegal operators from the market. We will get them all sooner or later." Well, that will be interesting to be monitored, but that's a goal, and that's a very important goal. Because, of course, now we either have a black market or let's call it a white market, and there's nothing in between. That's the difference to what we were used to all over these years in the past. And that means to protect the license and compliant business, enforcement must be successful, of course. René Jansen, the head of the regulatory body in the Netherlands, shared with us some insights based on his one-year experience in licensing practice in the Netherlands. And he told us that it's very important that regulators talk together on a cross-border basis, learn from each other. He encouraged the German regulators to stay in touch with their European colleagues, and he offered cooperation with the Netherlands. And I think that's a good start, because communication is always important, not only between regulators, among regulators, also, of course, among the stakeholders of this industry, the operators and the regulators. This has also been a point of discussion later when the trade associations were on the panel. We had a panel with Mr. Jansen, Mrs. Wierzejewski, and Birgitte Sand, the former Danish regulator. She served as head of regulation in Denmark for 11 years, and she conducted the beginning of regulation licensing practice in Denmark. Many of you, in particular those who come from abroad, remember the so-called Danish model, which served as an example for many regulations all over the world, including the Schleswig-Holstein regulation 10 years ago, when the Gaming Act in Schleswig-Holstein was enacted as a single-state approach to first-time online casino regulation in Germany, which is now a chapter that wrote history and now merged with the federal or with the state-by-state lender interstate treaty regulation. In this panel, we were happy to learn that in the future, we have a regulator who has more power. At the moment, we have these two authorities, Regional Council in Darmstadt and the State Administrative Office in Halle, and they're both conducting licensing procedures, application procedures. They're reviewing all the files and lots of documents, and in the end, they come to the conclusion, well, this is an application which is ready to be granted with a license. But they cannot grant that license unless the Glücksspielkollegium, the gaming committee, approves. And in the past, we learned that this sometimes was a problem or took time and caused several delays. In the future, the new GGL, the Joint Gambling Supervisory Office in Saxony-Anhalt, will have more power to make decisions. And Ms. Wierzejewski said, we will make decisions. There's a new board, an administrative board replacing the gambling committee, and ensures that there is some participation and in intervening with the 16 lenders, of course, because that is not a federal body, the GGL. It's still a body that is located in one German land, but based on an inter-treaty legal basis. And this administrative board will provide guidance, but they will not go into the details of decisions. So we can expect, in particular, if there's licensing regimes, decisions to be made earlier, faster, and binding, which I think is a great advantage and a big, big difference to what we've learning happens at the moment. Later, we had the industry's view, where the presidents of the German Online Casino Association, as well as the German Sports Betting Association, shared their view on the industry with us. And of course, we know they also listed the issues which we are talking about at the moment, and I summarized them just a minute ago. But they said, very important is that we create, or let me say, already created a level of trust, confidence, and dialogue with the regulator. Constant talks with the regulators over the years is something which is important, and it takes time, and you build up that level for communication. I think that is also matching with those advice René Jansen gave us yesterday. So I think it's important, and we can also see and realize that the regulators are happy to find common grounds in where to talk. That doesn't mean we always are of the same opinion. That is impossible. But I think the goal is, and that's something which I learned from these talks, the goal is to find common grounds, to make things better, not just doing lobbying work, but education, information. Both sides, all stakeholders, are new to German regulation, because German regulation is new. And so far, it's important to talk together, to review things, constantly provide assessment, and that is what Germany needs, rather sooner than later. The second thing that must be highlighted is the channelization. meaning we need to attract the players to play or to be punters with the regulated market, with the licensed market. Currently, the industry faced many players leaving the market and playing in black market environments, and that is something that needs to be changed. There's two ways which have been discussed. One, of course, is enforcement. The enforcement goal is sophisticated. I like to quote Mrs. Wierzejewski again, saying, we want 100% of the players playing with licensed operators. I think that is really a challenge, and probably it will not be 100%. But setting the goal so high is something which is worth being monitored, and of course, those measures who will be helpful to reach these goals were presented. There is IP blocking, payment blocking, criminal sanctions, first time ever under this licensing regime. It is considered to cooperate with public prosecutors, also to establish a special focused public prosecutor's office, just focusing on criminal illegal gaming. Probably this is something that is shocking and frightening the industry outside of licensing regimes. We will closely monitor how this works out, but I think decisions have been made to come closer to reach the highest and most advantageous goals in this particular regard. The final panel yesterday was about responsible gaming, and that is what regulation and licensing is all about. And we learned from those experts of responsible gaming, which was guided and moderated by Professor Becker, discussions by Dr. Anke Quack and Mr. Robert Müller-Ernst, representing the State Administrative Office in Halle. Central element of importance is the responsible gaming concept. Every operator needs to submit a very sophisticated responsible gaming concept, and that will be reviewed by the industry, and it has to meet high requirements and demands. So there is always reviewing, developing of these concepts. It needs to be monitored that this is fully applied. That is what the authority does. Also, very important to educate the staff, and that is a duty of the operators, which takes place frequently. There are periodical education available, and this is not just voluntary. This is provided by the law and within the license. So my time is over, but your time isn't. There's lots of opportunities to follow now, and I hope when you leave this conference in the afternoon, you're going back home and said, well, I come back next year. Enjoy the conference.
Thank you, Jörg, and see you later.
Thank you.